Chapter 16c, When Symbols Become Visible. There are moments in the development of civilization when nothing visible changes, yet perception itself begins to shift. Cities remain standing, institutions continue operating, rituals are still performed, and traditions continue guiding everyday life. From the outside, the symbolic systems of a culture appear stable and unchanged. Yet internally, something new begins to occur. Human beings slowly become aware of the structures that have always surrounded them. For most of history, symbols functioned invisibly. They organized perception without being noticed as symbols. Language shaped understanding long before people reflected on the nature of language itself. Myths guided behavior without being examined as narratives. Ritual created meaning without needing explanation. Symbols worked precisely because they were not questioned. They formed the silent architecture of civilization. People did not think about symbols, they lived through them. Social roles, moral expectations, religious practices, and cosmological beliefs all operated as natural extensions of reality itself. To participate in society meant to inhabit its symbolic language without noticing the framework that made such participation possible. This invisibility allowed symbolic systems to organize human life with extraordinary efficiency. A person born into a culture inherited an entire world of meaning already prepared. The sky already carried interpretation. Natural events already possessed mythological significance. Human relationships already followed symbolic patterns embedded in tradition. Meaning was everywhere. And precisely because it was everywhere, it was rarely examined. Yet over long periods of cultural development, something subtle begins to occur. The same accumulation of symbolic structures that once created stability gradually produces a new kind of awareness. As traditions multiply and interpretations layer upon one another, individuals begin noticing the frameworks themselves. The symbolic world becomes perceptible. At first, this awareness appears quietly. A person listening to a sacred story may suddenly recognize familiar patterns appearing across different cultures. A myth once taken as literal history begins to resemble a symbolic narrative. Ritual gestures reveal resemblance to natural cycles rather than supernatural command. Recognition emerges not through rejection, but through comparison. The human mind begins noticing repetition. Across civilizations, similar symbolic forms appear again and again. Stories of death and rebirth mirror seasonal cycles. Divine figures embody forces of nature. Cosmic battles resemble the struggle between order and chaos observed in the environment. Creation myths echo the rhythms of growth and transformation found throughout the living world. Patterns reveal themselves. What once appeared as isolated traditions now begins to resemble a vast symbolic language shared across cultures. The same images emerge independently in different regions of the world. Sun gods, mother figures, sky fathers, serpents, heroes, sacred mountains, and cosmic trees. Such repetition raises new questions. Why do these images appear so consistently? Why do cultures separated by geography and history develop similar symbolic stories? Why do myths describing the structure of the cosmos resemble psychological experiences within human life? The moment these questions arise, symbols change status. They are no longer experienced only as inherited truths. They become objects of investigation. Human beings begin studying their own symbolic systems. Philosophers analyze mythological language. Scholars compare religious traditions. Storytellers reinterpret ancient narratives in new contexts. Artists reshape symbolic imagery to reflect changing cultural perspectives. Symbolism becomes visible. Once visible, symbols begin revealing something deeper than the stories themselves. They appear not only as cultural creations, but also as expressions of recurring patterns within human experience. The boundary between external world and internal perception begins to blur. People notice that the same patterns appearing in myth and religion also appear in nature: cycles of birth and death, growth and decay, conflict and renewal. These patterns also appear in human life: childhood, maturity, decline, struggle and transformation, loss followed by rebirth. Symbolic language seems to mirror something fundamental about reality itself. The world appears structured through recurring patterns, and human beings seem naturally inclined to interpret those patterns symbolically. This recognition marks a turning point. For the first time, attention begins shifting from the symbols themselves toward the process through which symbols emerge. Instead of asking only what a myth means, people begin asking why the human mind produces myth at all. The question quietly changes the direction of inquiry. Rather than looking outward toward divine authority alone, observers begin examining the relationship between nature, perception, and meaning. The symbolic universe once accepted as given now becomes something to be understood. And once this shift occurs, human consciousness takes an extraordinary step. The mind begins observing its own symbolic activity. When symbols begin to reveal themselves, a remarkable realization slowly emerges. Traditions that once appeared isolated within particular cultures start to resemble variations of a much larger symbolic language. Myths from distant civilizations echo one another. Sacred stories share familiar structures. Images thought to belong to a single religion appear again in places separated by oceans and centuries. The human mind begins noticing repetition. Across the ancient world, civilizations that never met one another produced strikingly similar symbolic narratives. In Egypt, the sun traveled across the sky in a divine boat and descended into darkness before rising again. In Greece, the sun moved across the heavens under the watch of Helios. In many other cultures, solar deities represented light, order, and the life-giving force sustaining the world. Different names appeared, yet the pattern remained recognizable. The same repetition emerges in fertility myths. Agricultural societies across continents describe the earth as a mother figure, giver of life, nourisher of growth, source of renewal. The names changed from culture to culture, yet the symbolic image remained remarkably consistent. The earth as the great mother from whom life emerges and to whom it eventually returns. Even the structure of the universe appeared through similar symbolic forms. Many civilizations imagined a cosmic tree or pillar connecting heaven and earth. In the Norse world, it appeared as Yggdrasil, the great tree linking different realms of existence. In other cultures, similar symbols emerged as sacred mountains, temples, or central columns representing the axis of the world. The forms differed, yet the underlying image persisted. Such parallels puzzled early scholars who began comparing mythologies from different parts of the world. How could cultures separated by geography, language, and history create symbolic systems that resembled one another so closely? Why did so many traditions describe cosmic cycles of death and rebirth, divine conflicts between order and chaos, or heroes who descended into darkness before returning transformed? The answer gradually began revealing itself through a deeper understanding of patterns. Human beings, living within the same natural world, repeatedly encounter the same fundamental structures of experience. The rising and setting of the sun, the waxing and waning of the moon, the changing of the seasons, the cycle of life and death, all of these phenomena create rhythms that shape human perception long before they become stories. The mind recognizes patterns before it invents myths. From these observations emerge simple symbolic models. One of the oldest is the cycle: birth, growth, decline, and renewal. This pattern appears in nature through the seasons, in agriculture through planting and harvest, and in human life through generations. When expressed symbolically, the cycle becomes myths of dying and reborn gods, stories of transformation, or narratives describing the journey from darkness into light. Another model appears through duality. Day contrasts with night, light with darkness, order with chaos. Early observers interpreted these oppositions as cosmic struggle. Myth transformed this experience into stories of gods battling monsters, heroes confronting destructive forces, or divine figures restoring balance to a world threatened by disorder. A third model emerges through connection. Many cultures imagined the universe structured vertically, linking heaven, earth, and an underworld beneath the surface. This structure appeared symbolically through world trees, sacred mountains, or cosmic pillars connecting different realms of existence. These symbolic patterns arise again and again because they reflect recurring experiences shared by all human societies. When symbols become visible, these underlying structures begin to stand out clearly. Myth no longer appears as a collection of unrelated stories, but as a language expressing fundamental patterns of reality. Different cultures speak this language with different accents, yet the grammar remains strikingly similar. The realization changes the way people understand mythology. Instead of asking whether a myth is historically true, observers begin asking what pattern the myth expresses. The story becomes a symbolic representation of something deeper, something rooted in the rhythms of nature and the structure of human experience. A myth about the sun's daily journey reflects the cycle of light and darkness. A story about a divine mother reflects the life-giving power of the earth. A tale describing a hero's descent into the underworld mirrors the human experience of transformation through struggle. Symbols begin revealing their logic, and once that logic becomes visible, the boundary separating ancient mythology from modern culture grows less distinct. The same symbolic structures continue appearing, though often in new forms. The heroic journey survives in literature and cinema. The struggle between order and chaos remains central to countless stories. Images of rebirth continue shaping narratives of personal transformation. The symbolic language of the past has not disappeared. It has simply migrated. The temples of ancient civilizations may have fallen into ruins, but the symbols they once contained continue living within culture, art, and imagination. Stories told thousands of years ago still resonate because they express patterns the human mind continues recognizing today. When people begin to see these patterns clearly, symbols regain a new kind of power. They no longer appear as relics of ancient belief, but as expressions of something enduring within human perception itself. And this realization raises an even deeper question. If symbolic patterns appear consistently across civilizations and centuries, then the source of those patterns may not lie solely in culture or tradition. It may also lie within the structure of the human mind, the same mind that observes the stars, notices cycles in nature, and transforms those observations into stories capable of surviving across time. Once this possibility appears, the direction of inquiry shifts again. The study of symbols gradually becomes the study of perception, and the symbolic universe that once seemed external begins revealing its connection to the inner architecture of human consciousness. Modern civilization is just as symbolic as the ancient world, even if it rarely recognizes itself as such. The difference lies not in the presence of symbols, but in their visibility. Ancient cultures openly surrounded themselves with symbolic imagery. Temples, myths, and sacred rituals made symbolic meaning explicit. The symbolic language of the world was acknowledged and consciously maintained. Modern societies often assume that they have moved beyond symbolism. Science, technology, and rational institutions appear to have replaced mythological thinking. Yet beneath the surface of modern life, symbolic structures continue organizing human behavior in ways remarkably similar to ancient traditions. Money provides one of the clearest examples. A banknote is only paper. A digital balance in a bank account is only information. Yet entire economies move because people collectively believe in the symbolic value these representations carry. The symbol functions not because of its material substance, but because society agrees on the meaning it represents. Trust transforms symbol into power. Financial institutions, banks, and markets operate through systems of symbolic representation. Numbers, signatures, contracts, and digital records all function as symbols that organize economic reality. People work, trade, and build entire lives around meanings that exist primarily as shared agreements. The same principle appears within legal systems. Courts do not operate solely through physical force. They operate through symbolic authority. Robes, courtrooms, written laws, and official language represent structures of legitimacy recognized by society. A judge's decision carries power not because of the individual person speaking, but because the symbolic institution behind the role is acknowledged. Law functions as symbolic order. The authority of a court exists because people collectively recognize the symbolic meaning of legal institutions. Written documents, seals, official titles, and ceremonial procedures all reinforce the structure through which society organizes justice and conflict resolution. Corporations provide another example. A corporation has no physical body, yet it exists legally as a recognized entity. It possesses identity, rights, responsibilities, and influence within the economic system. Its presence is defined through symbolic markers, names, logos, contracts, and legal structures that represent the organization. The symbol creates the institution. Brand logos, corporate identities, and institutional emblems function in ways remarkably similar to ancient heraldic symbols or religious iconography. A single image can represent an entire network of relationships, values, and expectations shared by millions of people. These symbols shape behavior without requiring explanation. People trust certain brands, follow certain institutions, or respect particular authorities because symbolic recognition operates beneath conscious awareness. The human mind responds to symbolic signals quickly and instinctively. Even national identity operates symbolically. Flags, anthems, and national emblems represent entire populations through shared imagery and narrative. A flag itself is only fabric, yet it carries emotional significance capable of inspiring loyalty, sacrifice, and collective unity. Symbolic meaning transforms objects into expressions of identity. Once people begin recognizing these patterns, modern civilization begins to look less like a world without symbolism and more like a world saturated with it. Symbols organize financial systems. Symbols structure legal authority. Symbols shape corporate influence. Symbols define political identity. They surround everyday life, yet the majority of people rarely perceive these structures as symbolic systems. They experience them as ordinary reality, just as earlier civilizations experienced their myths and rituals as natural expressions of the world. The invisibility of symbols is precisely what allows them to function effectively. When a symbolic system becomes deeply embedded within a culture, it disappears into the background of perception. People no longer see the symbol itself. They see only the reality organized by that symbol. In ancient societies, symbolic systems were openly acknowledged. Temples displayed sacred imagery, rituals enacted cosmic stories, and myths explained the symbolic structure of existence. Modern societies often conceal symbolism behind language of practicality and efficiency, yet the underlying mechanism remains the same. Symbols communicate meaning quickly, organize social cooperation, and coordinate behavior across large populations. They act as a form of shared language through which complex systems can function without constant explanation. Symbols speak silently. They communicate through images, roles, institutions, and structures that the human mind recognizes almost instantly. Their influence often operates beneath conscious awareness, guiding perception and behavior without requiring deliberate reflection. This is why symbols can shape entire civilizations. They do not merely represent ideas. They structure the environments within which people live and make decisions. The symbolic language of a culture quietly defines what appears valuable, trustworthy, sacred, or legitimate. When symbols become visible, people begin noticing these forces. They start recognizing that the structures guiding society are not purely material systems, but symbolic frameworks sustained by collective belief and interpretation. Money functions because people agree on its meaning. Laws function because people recognize their authority. Institutions function because society accepts the symbols representing them. The entire structure of civilization rests upon symbolic understanding. Yet even this realization leads to a deeper question. If human societies consistently build symbolic systems to organize reality, whether through myth, religion, law, or economic structures, what is it within the human mind that produces this constant pattern of symbolic interpretation? Why does the human mind seem compelled to translate experience into symbols? This question marks the next stage in our exploration. For once symbols become visible in both ancient mythology and modern civilization, attention naturally turns toward the source of symbolic thinking itself. The human mind that recognizes patterns, creates meaning, and transforms observation into symbolic language. And it is there, within the architecture of perception itself, that the next chapter of this journey begins. Once symbols become visible, an unexpected continuity begins to appear. The images carved in ancient temples, the myths told around early fires, and the structures organizing modern societies all reveal the same underlying tendency of the human mind, the impulse to recognize patterns and translate them into meaning. The symbols may change their forms across time. Ancient civilizations expressed them through gods, sacred rituals, and cosmic myths. Modern societies express them through institutions, legal systems, economic structures, and cultural narratives. Yet beneath these different forms, the same symbolic language continues operating. Civilization evolves, but the symbolic impulse remains. Human beings continue interpreting the world through images, patterns, and narratives that organize experience into meaningful structure. What once appeared as isolated traditions now begins to resemble expressions of a deeper process, one in which the human mind and the patterned universe mirror one another. The question therefore shifts again. Instead of asking only how civilizations create symbols, we begin asking why the human mind recognizes these patterns so consistently. What within human perception allows certain images, stories, and symbolic structures to appear again and again across cultures and centuries? It is here that the study of symbols becomes the study of consciousness itself. And within that turning inward, the next discovery slowly emerges. The recurring symbolic patterns that appear throughout myth, religion, and culture may not be inventions of particular civilizations at all, but reflections of deeper structures shared within the human mind. The observer has begun to awaken.